And welcome back to another episode of In Conversation. We're carrying on our series through Lent on this idea of going on a spiritual journey and thinking about some of the essentials that we need to take with us. This morning we're going to be thinking particularly about taking shelter and finding security. And the image, the symbol that is used in the book is that of a tent.
I did suggest that we did this inside Samuel's circus play tent, but there wouldn't have been a lot of room. I'm not sure we'd have got the camera in as well.
And it probably would have been very dark.
Yeah.
So here we are back in the kitchen again, and we thought we'd do something similar to what we did a couple of weeks ago, just by starting our time together by reading from a passage from John's Gospel. So Calum's going to read to us from John chapter 10, verses 7 to 17.
It says this: "Therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay my life down, only to take it up again."
Brilliant, thank you. Paul Aguda, in using that passage from John, talks about the fact that we're all really familiar with that picture of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, but though we don't often read it together with that image of Jesus and the gate. And she says, actually, if we put them together, we get this idea of security and shelter that she's talking about in this week's session. And she says, Jesus as the gate is our way into safety, and Jesus as the shepherd is the one who keeps us safe once we're in the sheep pen. And she uses another image, Paula Gooder, to reflect on that idea. She uses the image of a castle door, and she says when a castle is under siege, the most important thing to do is to have a sturdy door that you can quickly pull up and shut.
A drawbridge.
Yeah. And she says a strong and secure door will keep all those inside safe from their attackers outside. Jesus, the door, welcomes us in, but also keeps us safe once we are in. So we thought we'd just try and expand a little bit on that idea in our conversation together this morning. And in thinking about security, we just thought we'd kick off really by thinking about the places where we find security, where we go for shelter amidst the kind of storms of life.
Yeah, and I guess for me, a place I go is family. So I come and spend time with Jess and Samuel. But I suppose another place that I've been finding more and more security is in the garden, doing gardening, creating, and just being outside.
Yeah, I think if you're anything like me, I'm a bit of a creature of habit, and I kind of always cling to those places that feel safe and familiar. So I think they might be in people, but they're ultimately those places where I feel that I can be truly myself.
Yeah, I think a place of security is somewhere that you go where whatever is troubling you, whatever is causing you grief, can be let go, can be left alone. And So for me, things that are, I guess, the attackers of the castle are those problems that I face in work, those problems I might face with family, those things that are potentially out of my control. And you know, those sorts of things in your life, they give you worries, they make you anxious, they maybe make you sleep less. It might even be health, and so going to do something that provides a distraction, I guess, is the place of security.
Yeah, I follow Stacey Solomon on Instagram, for any of you who know who she is, and she's just released a book called Tap to Tidy, and she's kind of become really well known for kind of organising her life to the extreme, so kind of everything has its place. Everything is put away, and she's kind of been sharing these ideas with people. And I heard her be interviewed about this the other day, and she's been known to say that organising for her is like a form of meditation. And what she means by that is it's something that she can do that focuses her mind on a particular thing, so that everything else that's going on is almost forgotten for the period of time that she's focusing on that thing. And I heard her say almost anything therefore can become like a meditation for us, if it achieves that goal of kind of focusing our attention away from the things that worry us and stress us out, and onto something a bit more positive.
I suppose the danger with that, speaking from a Christian perspective, is what people are taking meditation to be is to be at one with yourself, to kind of focus in on yourself and be at peace in yourself. And that's not how we were created to be. We were not created to be focused solely upon ourselves. That's very individualistic, and actually at its heart is very selfish. We were created to be in relationship as human beings. So actually saying, I need to do meditation to be at peace with myself isn't actually what we were created to be. We were created to be at peace with God. We were created to be in relationship with God. So meditation that isn't temporary, meditation that has long-lasting effects, is actually bringing us to be at peace, at one with God. And I appreciate, I might be really controversial with what I've just said there.
No, that's helpful. It's always good to kind of hear the flip side of that.
That's my opinion anyway. And so using that word meditation, I'm always very careful to make sure that if I'm getting involved in meditation, that it's Christian meditation. Yeah. Because actually individualism and being an individual and focusing on myself leads me to actually quite dark and difficult places. This week, obviously, we've had the revelations of what's been going on in the royal family and darkness. For me, some of the darkest points in my life in years have gone by have been when I focused solely on myself and internalised everything. And actually, a big part of who we are created to be as humans is sharing our lives with God, who knows us and understands us completely. And like we said last week, he places people around us to support us and help us. But internalising everything through meditation on ourselves is not helpful.
No, but which is presumably why some people might actually answer that question of where you find security with the church or the kind of community in which you're set, because actually there's kind of some comfort, some familiarity, some safety within that.
Yeah.
So just kind of moving that kind of conversation on a little bit further, and thinking about kind of where we get our security from and what we place our security in, is kind of the reverse, if you like, of security. That is this idea of risk, of kind of things not feeling very safe. And Paula Gooder actually says in her book that as a modern society, we kind of place quite a high premium on being risk-free. We're quite risk-averse as a society, because we're worried about the kind of consequences of what might happen, particularly kind of in an age of legal action and Ofcom and all that sort of stuff that you hear about. And yet she says this that really struck me when I was reading it, and which we were kind of reflecting on before we started filming. She says, It is only when something belongs to you that you are prepared to risk your life to save it. Jesus' care for us means that he is prepared to go to extreme lengths to ensure that we can find sanctuary. The challenge to each one of us is whether we are prepared to accept the sanctuary he offers, or whether we prefer safety of a different kind. So I guess kind of linked to what we were just talking about, but actually how do we find that security in God, those places of sanctuary that God offers us, over and above perhaps other things that we might cling to that perhaps aren't healthy and helpful?
Again, we're just going to come back to the points that we raise every time, and maybe that's why following material like this isn't necessarily helpful, but it's about prayer, it's about worship, it's about placing God in our lives. But as you were reading that, I just remembered the story of Paddington, particularly the film with Hugh Bonneville in, who's a risk analysis for an insurance company, and at the beginning of the first film he just talks about all these risks and percentages and why you can't do certain things because it's so many 1,000% a risk. And by the end of the film he has undertaken so many risks for the sake of his family, for the sake of those people he loves. He kind of, his whole identity has changed. He's not a person that lives in fear anymore. And I think all of us look at risk, all of us look at fear, and all of us look to go to that place of safety. If you think about Peter in Scripture, he is a person that takes risks, and he's rewarded for those risks because he knows that when he places his life in the hands of Jesus Christ, nothing ultimately bad will happen to him. And with our lives, we can try and make them safe in our own castles, but Jesus tells us things of this world will always fall apart. Or we can place our trust in him, and he doesn't fall apart because he's already overcome death.
Yeah, and I guess what we see with Peter, particularly in taking risk, is actually it's okay to make mistakes. You know, he gets it wrong time and time again, which is probably why he's so lovable as a disciple, because we can relate to him so much. And there's always kind of, in putting his trust, in putting his life in Jesus' hands, there's almost that safety net, really, that he's going to be caught, no matter how far he falls.
Yeah, I think Justin Welby, when he was Dean of Liverpool Cathedral, he said, we spell faith using the word risk. What are we doing as a community of people worshipping God here in this enormous building? That means we're taking a risk, and if we're not taking a risk, we're not following Jesus faithfully. And that was a real challenge to the people of Liverpool, which they're still living out even to this day, and he's been gone almost kind of 10 years already.
Yeah, I think it's still their motto, isn't it? Doing risky things in Christ's service. And
faith is a risk. It's the Indiana Jones film all over again, stepping out when you can't see what you're stepping foot on, but trusting in Jesus. Because if we truly believe the gospel, if we truly trust in Jesus, if we truly receive the grace of God, we know that Jesus will never let us down. And actually part of that is laying down our own risk assessments.
So what do you think that looks like in practice?
I was going to ask you that question.
I didn't know if you wanted to share your story at that point. Yeah,
so I was, whenever I'm talking about risk and faith, I kind of come to this story I was once told, which I guess is humorous, but there's a guy who, he lives in this town that's being flooded, and he knows that the flood is coming, and he's told to prepare and to get out and get to safety. He says, no, I'm a man of faith, I'm a man of God, so I'm going to pray and God will look after me. And so he prays whilst everybody else is evacuating, and the floodwaters come, and the floodwaters start rising. And so he prays again and said, Lord, help me, I need your help. And the local fire brigade come along in a boat, and they say, get on board. And he says, no, I'm a man of faith, I'm a man of God, and God will save me. And so they say, okay, and they leave him, and the waters keep rising, so he has to go to the first floor of his house. and he prays again. He says, Lord, help me. And nothing comes necessarily, so he has to go up to the roof of his house, and he says, Lord, help me. And a helicopter comes by, and they lower down a rope for him to climb up on and take him to safety. But he says, no, I'm a man of faith, God will save me. And the waters keep rising, and eventually he ends up drowning. Happy story, I know. And he gets to heaven, and God says, what are you doing here? And he says, well, I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I asked you for help, but you didn't send me any help. And God said, I did. I sent you the forewarning before the floods happened. I sent you the boat, and I sent you the helicopter. Why didn't you get on board? Why weren't you listening? And for me, part of that story is actually taking risk is about offering all of who we are and all of what we have to God. And actually, when things come along that might not seem completely holy, they might actually be of God.
Yeah, I think there's a danger sometimes, isn't there, that we can almost over-spiritualise things and almost have a kind of neatly tied up, packaged answer of what we expect to happen, or the kind of rescue that we expect to come, so that when something else comes along, we kind of miss it completely. I mean, just look at Jesus himself. They had a very particular idea of who the Messiah would be and what the Messiah would come to do, and when he came and was almost a complete contrast to that, lots of them just missed it and couldn't get their heads around it. And so I think it's just really easy for us sometimes, and this perhaps brings us back full circle to where we started, to almost discount some of those more ordinary everyday things that we would class as security and safety, because we think they're not of God, when actually maybe the challenge is to look for God in those things. And yes, okay, like anything, there's a balance to be struck, as we were talking about in the middle of our conversation. Actually, you really need to discern what is of God and what isn't. But actually, that's not to say that, you know, family or gardening or, you know, whatever it is for you can't be of God.
And I think to use the image, when we set out to do these conversations, it was about sharing a bit of who we are and our faith and our hopes and passions. And we've been doing it now for, I think it's probably the 26th episode, so we're running out of some ideas, and so that's why we're using this book in Lent. And I don't want us to get too preachy and lose the kind of the art of conversation, which I feel we might be getting too close to. But what I love about the parable of the sheep and gates, and Jesus kind of saying, I am the gate, is when he was talking, actually sheep pens were stone walls, and there were gaps every so often in these stone walls. And so what Jesus is saying is he's standing in the gap, and sheep were let out into the fields and the pastures during the day. They were allowed freedom, they were allowed to roam, they were allowed to do their own thing. But the shepherd would then come and stand back in the gap and call his sheep by name. He would call his flock, and they would come back and they would enter through the gate, and then he would stand in that passageway again to protect his sheep. You are given so much freedom in life and so much opportunity in life to do what you want, but God knows who you are. God knows your name, and God knows when you need him as your safety net, and he will never let you down. He will never leave you, and it's our job to refine our hearing, to be listening for his voice, calling us to safety, but also calling us out into those places where we need freedom. So in our Lent books that we've been going through at St Michael's, we've been talking about evangelism and stepping out into some of the scary things that are called evangelism, but actually just stepping out into relationships with people and being prepared to actually tell people that we're Christians in a gentle, friendly, normal, keyword, normal fashion, and just waiting for God to use us in those conversations. And part of that is actually trusting him, and not just sitting in our nice cozy arena of my faith is my faith and I'm never going to share it because sharing is too scary. And actually that's not what Jesus asks of us.
Definitely. I think that's perhaps another conversation for another time, because I'm just aware we've been going on for 20 minutes now. So that probably just seems a good place for us to stop. Following on from what we've been talking about this week, next week we're going to be thinking about enjoying refreshment, and that's going to be the last one in this this series. So we're going to have to come up with something else, or if you guys again have got anything that you want us to particularly talk about, we'd love to hear from you.
And spring is just around the corner, so it might be at some point soon we can get outside to film rather than sit inside.
Back where we started.
Back where we started many weeks ago. I hope our episode today has been helpful and not just us rambling and preaching and not really making a lot of sense. It's been a long week so far, but we hope it's helpful and it's a blessing to you. And just to encourage you, take risks in your faith, step out for Jesus, because the rewards are always immense.
Definitely. Take care. See you soon.